Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey, welcome back to Voice of Gord. This is a something of an emergency broadcast. I wanted to put something together for those who've been looking on at the incident in Florida with shock and dismay and horror, just like everybody else. And for those folks who don't understand the trucking industry or what's been going on in it the last few years, especially with the mass insourcing of labor, my regular listeners will know the score, especially if they tuned into my episodes with a bunch of my guests I have today who've already been on before, especially Shannon Everett when we discussed the replacement of American truckers. Back in the wintertime. Anyhow, none of this will be new to you, but if you're a new listener to this show, or if you want more explicit detail on this, I had Shannon, Danielle, and Justin come back so that we can, dive deep into this, because as we mentioned in the show, it's not just about immigration, it's not just about the Democrats or Gavin Newsom or bad policy or greedy Amazon or, just mass migration. It's all of those things and more, government malfeasance, lack of enforcement. Just there's so many different things going on here, and I wanted to give everybody a zoomed out 30,000 foot view of the situation. So I hope you find this useful. And if you know people who are still wondering what the heck is going on here, please send this to them. Questions, comments, suggestions, corrections, and email, hate mail, as always, are welcomed and strongly encouraged. You can get a hold of me, Gordylocks@protonmail.com. If you're listening to this on your podcast platform of choice and you haven't already, head on over to my Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Subscriptions are fun, and that way you never miss anything. And again, if you know people who are curious about the details of exactly what went on here and the hows and whys and how did we get here and why are we seeing so many of these crazy truck crashes, please send this along to them. Thank you for listening. And I hope you enjoy the show. Thanks so much. All right, g'day everybody. Welcome back to a somewhat emergency episode of the Voice of Gord podcast. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. I've assembled a team here today, downstream of this horrific event that took place in Florida last week. I'm sure you've all seen the video and seen the commentary on it in the last few days online or in your local news or somewhere in the media, because it's everywhere. A big truck turned left across traffic on the Florida Turnpike and killed 3 innocent motorists when they drove their truck into their minivan, into the trailer at speed, and they're no longer with us. And it's generated a lot of discussion. I believe this issue has touched a big nerve in America because the drivers of that truck, as we will tell you in this presentation, were not from the United States. The guy behind the wheel, in fact, was not here legally, and it remains to be seen whether or not the CDL that gentleman had on him was even issued legally. And obviously, this is of great import to the trucking industry and to the safety of the American motoring public and Canada and basically all of North America, because this incident in Florida is not alone. It's not unique. It's been happening constantly. And a number of us have been talking about this online and in the media. And we are here. I brought everybody together because each of the folks in this presentation have a particular insight and expertise into this issue and all of the things that connect to it and how deep and far back it goes.
So I'm going to introduce everybody and then we'll get going. So, ladies first, Ms. Danielle Chafin, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I was listening to one of a live space or something you were at the other day. My little boy was listening and he laughed so hard when you said my last name. It was really funny. Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Chaffin. I am third generation in the trucking industry, grandfather and father, both truck drivers, very long careers. Um, Super passionate about it. I love data. We'll get into that a little bit later. And I think that's it for me for now.
I'm Shannon Everett with American Truckers United. I've been in the industry for 25 years. There's three generations of my family in trucking. I'm the second generation, but two of my sons have also now joined the business. And I've been focused for the last 6 years on B1 truck drivers and within the last year, non-domicile CDLs.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Good morning. I'm just some loud jerk on Twitter, Justin Martin. I go by Super Trucker. I kind of made the name as a joke. I don't have as many deep roots as a lot of these guys. I wouldn't say my family is X number of generations, but we've had some way of being in transportation. I was a truck driver for 15 years. My parents drove truck together for a little while. My mom's mom was a school bus driver for 35 years. Her mother was a milk tank truck hauler up in the mountains in Tennessee back in the 20s and 30s. So, um, yeah, I got some roots in this industry as well.
Right. You also were the social media guy at Freight Waves and have been sort of circling around trucking media for a long time.
Yeah, I've either purposely or accidentally, I'm not sure yet, kind of like figured out that I have a lot of I have a big enough audience now that people are actually reaching out to us all the time saying, hey, look into this. It used to be me just going out and looking for stuff, but we're reaching a point now where I think enough people kind of see me and my account as like this is somebody people need to like forward stuff to really get the message out.
Right. Yeah, I get a lot of that as well. Hi, everybody. My name's Gord. Typically, I don't, yeah, you'll have to pardon me for being nervous. I don't put out video podcasts. I don't compete with like YouTube and the Rumble guys. I normally do an audio podcast. And so you'll have to pardon me here. But anyway, like Shannon, three generations of my family in trucking. I've told a lot of people my grandpa was a tank driver, landed at Normandy in a Canadian uniform driving a Sherman, came home, got into the trucking business. My dad, both my uncles, truckers, me, trucker. Uncle Chris eventually started one of the biggest freight brokerages in Canada that was later sold off and became Uber Freight Canada. And because of the issue, or in part because of the issue we are here to discuss today, I have been unemployed for 2 years because getting a job as a truck driver in North America, when you have as much experience as I have, actually disqualifies you because the industry is now set up to chase the very bottom barrel, cheapest rates possible, which basically excludes me from service despite 28 years of a near perfect driving record and having never killed anybody. Anyhow, so this story encapsulates so much, as I said off the top. We've got a driver who is originally from India who entered America illegally. It seems that his work authorization, there's some arguments about who issued it, who canceled it, who reissued it. There's now a fight with Gavin Newsom about this. Um, Shannon's been on this with the non domiciled CDL issue with all of his research at ATU Truckers. The problem is not just California. There's a number of states engaging in this practice of issuing non domiciled CDLs. Over and above that, a number of states, DOT and DMV, have been caught in bribery scandals where they've just been issuing CDLs willy nilly to whoever will pay for one without any actual testing going on. This is going on as well across a number of states. We have a problem in Canada with Justin Trudeau and his temporary foreign worker visa program being massively expanded during his tenure, student visas being massively expanded during his tenure, and all of those people somehow getting sucked into the Canadian trucking industry via our new friends who recently arrived in Canada from India. All of this comes together in this crash, and it is so much deeper than any one of these particular issues and goes back a long way. So that's what I want people to understand here. It's not just about Gavin Newsom. It's not just about the Democrats. It's not just about any one component of the trucking industry. And it's not even just our friends from India. We have a whole problem. Those of us on FreightX that pay attention to this, the Chicago Volvo Mafia, who are a number of countries from the Balkans and South and Eastern Europe, whose residents and citizens are now centered in the Chicago area and own literally hundreds of trucking companies who employ almost exclusively their homeboys from Eastern Europe and the Balkans. So it seems like the industry is having a big problem being parasitized by these outside forces, and a big problem with our government not enforcing immigration law and not enforcing basic CDL standards. So there's a whole long story here, and I want Shannon to start because his organization, American Truckers United, has been at the forefront of researching a problem centered on what's called non-domiciled CDLs. Shannon, go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. And so, one of the things that we uncovered late last year when legislation was put in front of us in the state of Arkansas to legalize what we now know to be non-domiciled CDLs really took us by surprise, because at the time, we had been tunnel vision focused on B1 visitor visas. And so when we first saw the legislation, we didn't know what a non-domiciled CDL was. And what's so interesting about this whole conversation is, as we started peeling the onion to non-domiciled CDLs, that's me and my friend Harvey, we found out that, both he and I have been in the business for a very long time. Like I said, multi-generational. His story is the same as mine. And we didn't know what they were when we called and talked to leadership at the associations and such. They didn't know what they were. In fact, I've since gone on to talk to leaders in USDOT and FMCSA, and everybody is really shocked at how pervasive this non-domiciled CDL thing has become. But what was most shocking is how unaware everyone was that it even existed. I think everybody knew in the industry that our eyes were telling us that, hey, somehow we've got a bunch of new participants in the trucking industry. I think whether you're a motor carrier and you've lost lanes to competition and you didn't understand why, or you're a truck driver and you're pulling up to a shipper and you're trying to talk to someone and they can't communicate with you because they don't speak English, or you're a broker and you're on the phone with people every day who are unable to give you a straight answer in English, and so you have to hire bilingual operators and people in your track and trace department just to be able to communicate with these people. Everybody has known something's going on, but nobody knew what the root of it was, from what was enabling these people to get trucks and to get this freight and get on our highways. And I now strongly believe that this non-domicile CDL has been a very big vein or artery for the supply of these drivers. And so, the B1 driver, I believe, kind of opened this door for everyone. It was the first thing. We had B1 drivers coming down from Canada. We had the B1 drivers coming up from Mexico. This door got opened through NAFTA. And so all of a sudden our law enforcement agencies, they're dealing with drivers that don't speak English because these drivers are being allowed past the border checkpoints. And so as that starts happening, law enforcement's frustrated, state agencies are all frustrated with this new cohort of drivers. And so I think the barrier started getting pulled down to accommodate this trade. And so when the non-domiciles arrive, the barriers are already kind of lower. And so they're able to slide in a little bit easier. And so the mechanisms were put in place by the B1. I'll go ahead and call it an invasion. And those mechanisms were put in place. And then so when the non-domicile comes, it explodes. And so it doesn't take but a couple of years for it to get out of control. And we're not in the beginning. We're toward the end. And so this has been going on for such a long time now. The B1 thing started really in 2016. So we're 9 years into that. This non-domicile program started around 20, so we're 5 years into that. And so there's been a ton of damage here, a ton of accidents that have never been reported on, that have just, I've got cases that are under seal right now that are protected that I can't tell y'all about, but I've got tons of them with families that have been destroyed, just like the cases that y'all are seeing here on the news that never made it to the headlines, never made it to the front pages. And those are all just recent. So
what was the mechanism by which I'm sorry to interrupt. Why is it that these cases are sealed and not being discussed in the media? Like at request of the family, or like just the courts putting a seal on it? Like what's going on there?
It's court records. And so I'm trying to help some families in these incidents. And so in time that stuff will be made public. But and so how much of that stuff, I'll give you a great example. I was sitting in my office last Sunday and my father-in-law walked in, and he's kind of been a little standoffish to the whole thing. It's so, because it's so controversial. He's like, maybe you shouldn't be going so hard at this. and and rightfully so. He's a very conservative guy, and I love him to death. But he walks in my office at home, and he's in tears. He's crying, and so I immediately asked him what's going on, and he said, "Do you remember the crash that happened in Colorado?" And I said, I don't know. And he said it was Lyman, Colorado. It was a guy rear-ended a truck, and his wife and kids were killed. And I said, yes, I do. I remember looking at that case. I reviewed it. Nobody reported the driver's name. Nobody reported the carrier's name. And so I moved on. I didn't investigate it very deeply. He said that was my second cousin. He had just found out. We were at church that morning, and he had just found out from his cousin that their relative was the person involved in that crash, and they had actually come to Arkansas to see his mother, and they were returning back home when his wife and his two children were killed in that accident. And I said, well, from what I recall, I don't remember these guys being involved. He said, well, will you go check it out? So I went and opened that case back up. I went and y'all probably saw me report it on X the other day. I was like, oh, there's new information now on this accident, because as soon as I went and pulled up the USDOT number, in fact, Justin picked up on it real quickly. He's like, oh, I've been to that location. I know that address. So that was connected to the crash that I'm talking about, Justin.
Oh, wow.
And so
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. That is a well-known shady drop yard in Philadelphia.
So what I quickly identified was that the carrier that was involved in the accident was domiciled out of this shared drop location up there in Pennsylvania. And then I looked at I learned from Danielle, looking at the inspections and stuff. I found they had these English language violations. I found that they had no CDLs. These guys are getting inspected all the time and not having CDLs. So they have no CDLs. They've got English language violations. They got hours of service violations. And so I told my father-in-law, I said, absolutely, you tell that family to call me, and we're going to try to help them. So now, it's touched my family, and I never knew it was going to get there, but here we are. And, Cole Stevens is a good friend of mine. He runs Stevens Trucking out of Oklahoma. He was instrumental in passing SB20 and getting all the hard work and heavy lifting done over there. He said before, like, we've got to fight this, because what would we do if we wake up one day and our family's involved? One of our family members is involved in one of these accidents, and we had an opportunity to do something. He's absolutely correct. And now, it has touched my family, even if distantly,
Right. So for the new, I'm going to just go back to something we mentioned earlier. For people who are watching this for the very first time, I'm hoping this gets spread around for those who want a holistic understanding of the issue here. English language proficiency. It has been a requirement to get a commercial driver's license in the United States of America to be able to communicate effectively in English since what, 1937? Am I correct?
Yeah. It was 32
Very
or 36. Cool. It was the Motor Carrier Act.
Long time.
Right. So Shannon also mentioned 2016 when he starts seeing all these the misuse of these visas by Mexican and Canadian carriers in the United States. 2016 is also when we see this very curious move by the FMCSA in the waning days of the Obama administration, who waived the out of service enforcement provisions available to law enforcement when they find a driver who cannot communicate effectively in English. Out of service means they take that driver and place him out of service. We are sorry, sir or ma'am, you're not allowed to drive a truck. You do not communicate effectively in English. That's called being placed out of service. Someone else has to come get the truck. Maybe it gets towed away. Maybe the trucking company sends a different driver, whatever, but that driver's off the road until they can learn how to speak English. The Obama administration waives the enforcement of this, which opens up yet another loophole for the insourcing of all of this labor into the United States trucking market.
And I'll jump in on that too. I think this is also kind of a misapplication of what a non-domicile CDL is. My first CDL was a non-domicile CDL. I was in trucking school in Wisconsin, Green Bay, Wisconsin, through Schneider, and we were all of us in our class were staying at the hotel there in town. So when we took the state exam, the address on our CDL was the hotel that we were all staying at. Of course, we don't live there, and so our instructions were when you get your CDL within the next 2 weeks, as soon as you get home, transfer that to your home state. So I was always under the assumption of, oh, a non-domicile CDL is just the first CDL you get when you get through training, and then you got to transfer it to your actual physical home address. So yeah, I had no idea that so much of this was going on until Shannon really brought the whole non-domicile issue to light.
They're meant to be temporary. And what's happening, and I think what Shannon is finding, is that they're not actually temporary. And instead of being used for these very specific purpose of, like, you went to trucking school in a different state, maybe you just moved somewhere, you're going to have a temporary non-domicile CDL, but that's on the assumption that you've taken the appropriate training, done the appropriate tests, and you're a legitimate truck driver that's just waiting to get your license transferred over. That's not what's happening via the data that Shannon has found.
That's right. And in fact, we've got many examples of these non-domiciled CDLs being issued to these non-citizens well beyond the expiration of the visas that they're using to obtain them. And so, a lot of times the visa is only good for, a year, maybe a year and a half. And we've got states that are issuing the CDL license out 5 and 6 years, or even more in some cases. I've already heard some that are expiring in the 2030, 2031.
The latest one I have is 2032.
Yeah.
Which it's insane. And there's so many of them.
And so why would an agency issue a CDL for 6 or 7 years when a guy's sitting there he's obviously presenting them with the EAD that's only good for 6 months? And it's not just one agency doing it. It seems to be across the board.
That's one of the threads I put together on X, is really just showing how many of these DMV CDL bust or schemes that we've had. I think the earliest article, as far as I went back, was like 2015, but more recently, there's so many of them.
Yes, they are, and this is the problem. So there are people who are rightly concerned with the massive growth of the administrative state in many areas of life, not just trucking. And what we see is that there's a sort of diffusion and distribution of responsibility, which usually means a diffusion and an inability to get any accountability when things go wrong. And because there's all these sort of layered systems, CDLs, who's doing immigration, who's checking the work authorization, who's doing the insurance, that's another major problem we've got going on here. And there's so many cracks that are sort of intrinsic to a multi-layered system, and nobody really overseeing the whole thing in total. Shannon, I was hoping you could speak a little bit to the insurance thing, because I get asked that a lot, and I've had a lot of difficulty getting insurance people in the insurance sector to speak with me. In fact, I've only gotten one out of the last 4 or 5 years. And when we last spoke, you had some insight into what's going on with that.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of investigation into that, and you know, if you just look at the case that just happened in Florida, Great West Casualty was the insurance company for that motor carrier, and that is a big insurance carrier. I've used Great West Casualty in the past. They're very well known. They're used by a lot of large fleets. They are not a fly by night insurance carrier by any standard, and so the fact that they would be insuring a motor carrier with no physical address. Here's what I know. Anytime I've bought insurance for my fleets, I get a safety guy assigned to my fleet who comes out and sits down with the owner of the company and with the director of safety. And we go through a program like, this is what we're going to do to be safe. And we have to submit to him a proposal. And then he'll come back and review that with us. And that's happened at Great West. Great West has sent people to my office, and we've gone through that. And so how is it then that they could be providing insurance for someone that doesn't even have a physical office? How did they perform that same inspection that they require of the American trucking companies on that trucking company, when all of these trucking companies that I'm finding that are connected to all of it, if they're connected to all of these metrics that we're talking about, they're all going back to apartments. They're all going back to virtual addresses or somebody's single family home. And there's no safety staff. There's no dispatch staff. There's no shop staff. There's no maintenance teams. And so there should be alarms going off for insurance carriers when they pull up in an apartment building, right?
So
But
I
my-
will say yes, you're right on that. I will say on this one in Florida, I don't know how the insurance works exactly. It's definitely not my area of expertise, but they've had multiple US DOTs, and on the actual business filing is an address that goes to a yard. You can pull it up on Google Maps and it takes you there. They have an older sign right outside of the yard. So I don't know if that address goes in on insurance, like the
So
LLC
you,
filing.
you think what they're filing with the FMCSA versus what they're filing with your insurance are two totally different addresses?
Yes. Yeah,
Man,
absolutely.
talk about a
And
red flag.
yes, and because of the mess that we have in the FMCSA data, the US DOT data, I understand why they're doing that, so it doesn't immediately match up with a previous US DOT and address.
Mm. I like that post you had yesterday where you asked freight brokers like which insurance companies are like the not the carriers, but the actual insurance companies are like the biggest red flags. And Lloyd's of London keeps popping up in like a lot of the replies. What is up with that place? I've never been a freight broker, so I'm not like too familiar with the whole insurance side. But
Yeah, I don't know
whenever I
why.
see like that many accounts all saying the same name, I'm like, okay, what's up with these guys?
I know it was a thing when I was a freight broker too, but I was too far away from that side of the business. I didn't know why.
they're just so massive, you can't help but their name be touching stuff because there's just such a big player in the market.
Yeah, and Lloyd's of London is old. Lloyd's of London has been around since 17th, 18th century. They were insuring ships. That's where they got started.
They're usually backing up the paper, so they're usually the over insurance or but I know what Gord was wanting me to do. He's wanting me to name drop the one that I shared with him the other day, that we have identified certain insurance carriers that are specializing in insuring these guys, and we're not ready to reveal that yet.
Oh no, that's fine. But one of the little tricks that we discussed when you were on my show is that an insurance carrier will issue one of these sort of shady chameleon carriers that's like registered to a Dunkin' Donuts or a pizza joint or an apartment complex with 300 other companies, all these LLCs going back and forth. They'll somehow get some insurance and they'll say it's fleet, but they've actually only paid for insurance for like 2 trucks or 10 trucks, and they're like copying the paperwork and putting it in 100.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. So the permit book that's in a truck just requires you to have a physical copy of the insurance certificate. The officer does not take that insurance certificate and go match it to the VIN and make sure that the truck is covered by insurance. And so a part of the fraud that these guys are carrying out is the fact that the inspection by the DOT officer does not require them to run a check on the VIN to make sure that that VIN is in a database and has insurance. They just have to present a photocopy of an insurance certificate that could be fraudulent. And I'll say this too. We're hearing in Oklahoma that we have an explosion right now in cab card fraud, where they're actually not only is the insurance fraudulent, but now the plates on the trucks are fraudulent too, because they're falsifying all the cab cards.
That's interesting because, we see these posts on Twitter all the time, or X, whatever we're calling it now, of Facebook groups where they'll have a post that says, "Hey, we're hiring 50 drivers." And if I go to that group and I scroll back a couple months, they are constantly hiring as many drivers as like hundreds of drivers
It's
for the
insane.
months. And when I find out who these guys are, because they're stupid enough to post, a truck with a DOT number on it or their cell phone, these are fleets with like 200, 300, 400 trucks. So you think that these guys maybe only have like insurance on like 2 or 4 of these trucks, and the rest are just kind of copy and paste in each other's paperwork?
I'm gonna share part of my article with Freight Caviar with the Facebook post. I think it's on there, right? Yeah, you should see it. So there's a couple of screenshots of those Facebook posts where they're selling them. And this is, unless they're selling an entire business, the LLC, the bank, everything changing hands, this is illegal.
As I understand it, the motor carrier number, the MC number, which everyone is supposed to have, they're eliminating that in October and replacing the system, the registration, with something else.
Just the US DOT number, I think, right? Or is it going to be something different?
I believe it's just the DOT, and then anyone signing up for a new DOT, they have to submit like biometrics, like your face scan, fingerprints, all that.
All for it.
Great going forward, but now what are you going to do with all the guys that have
Yes.
been kind of like how Craig was super bullish on the freight market with the lead up with these tariffs? It's like everybody front loaded all this freight coming in before the tariffs came in, and I that's kind of my gut feeling on a lot of these carriers coming into the market right now. We're seeing this huge spike of carriers come in, and I think it's because these guys are trying to rush in before this October deadline.
Right. And speaking of front loading or doing something after the gates shut, Shannon posted something earlier today about the non-domiciled CDLs. We know Secretary Duffy made an announcement, I believe near the end of June, that they are going to investigate these states. The problem is they're already out there operating, right? And I'm just curious if anyone has some insight. Like, I know we don't work for the government, but would it be possible under some emergency declaration on the part of US DOT or FMCSA to say, look, like, we have a major problem here, and everybody with a non-domiciled CDL, you have a week to get your butt home, and then that's it. Your license is being temporarily suspended until we figure out what's going on here, and we check in on you and your training and your identity and your work authorization and all this stuff. Because it's clear, especially south of this Biden trucking task force in 2021, and the massive spike in the issue of CDLs, which were, resulted in within 12 months, another 400,000 plus CDLs, that we have a major problem on the roads right now, and closing the gate doesn't do anything about all the horses that have already gone through it.
I think the problem is if you look at what, Sean Duffy is just one guy in charge of like this gigantic operation, and everything he's putting out publicly is, look at these new airport terminals we're making, and look at this. I'm temporary head of NASA now, and they are so distracted with like all these other bigger things that they're in charge of, that trucking just kind of gets ignored. And then Trump, as the commander in chief, he's out there, trying to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine right now. So I get it; they got a lot on their plate, but it's like, while that's happening, trucking is just going through a complete, meltdown right now. And I think the only reason why we even get eyeballs on these problems right now is because of these gigantic high profile crashes that we're seeing.
Absolutely.
So the non-domicile CDL come into existence not because of a law that was written, not because of an executive order, but because of guidance that was issued by the FMCSA. So I think it would be fair to say that they could reverse that guidance pretty quickly and shut these guys down. And so the same guidance that they wrote that said, hey, we believe that you can issue non-domiciled CDLs now to non-citizens could be just reversed. And what does that mean for the ones that are still out there? I think that definitely stops the issuance. But I believe this is another executive order. I believe the problem is so big that you're going to see the USDOT have to get the administration involved to get the change that we need.
Absolutely.
That was my I'm sorry, Daniel. That was my big thing that I kept hammering on Duffy on Twitter all the time when he first took office is like, look, this was done with like a signature. You could take your phone out right now out of your pocket and shut it down right now. And that was like months that it took for them to really kind of reverse that with an executive order. So that is one nice thing. Like you said, none of this stuff was passed through Congress. It wasn't a law. It was just guidance. So yeah, by all means, reverse it.
I'm going to share this real quick. Justin, you shared it earlier, but we didn't touch on it. But it was the CDLs, and this issue is so big that there's no way, I do not think there's a way to address it in groups. It would have to be all of it. And so if you look at, we can't really see those 4 New York ones, but if you look at this New York one, this temporary visitor, wow, English. Temporary visitor expires September 22nd, 2022. By law, that CDL expiration date is supposed to be that same date.
That's right.
And if you look at that one, it expires August 2026. So 4 years later. So I don't know. I mean, I have hundreds of these. I don't know. I haven't seen one yet that is legal and the temporary
Now,
visa.
Danielle,
And
what I want to point out is the fact that all of the California licenses, none of them say non-domicile.
they do not. All they say is limited term, and they don't have that date on there. I'm going to go ahead and assume that some of them are the same. A lot of the California ones I will see where it's either a 6-month term, 2-month, or a 2-year term, but some of them are longer. Like the one in the bottom right is 3 years.
And so the rule on non-domicile is that the state is supposed to identify them as non-domicile. And so, Overdrive magazine's thrown a bunch of mud at us because we said, oh, there's 800,000 of these. What we said was the Obama administration in the White House fact sheet said that they printed 876,000 CDLs when they started the Biden-Harris Trucking Action Plan. Okay. Now we suspect, because we were in the middle of a driver shortage when they issued all of those, that all of these new drivers that they found had to come from somewhere new. It had to be, in fact, the Arkansas Trucking Association had a quote for the Biden-Harris Trucking Action Plan that said, we welcome this new cohort of drivers. Okay. And so our suspicion is that the new cohort is the non-domicile CDL driver.
I'm sorry, Shannon, I didn't mean to interrupt. What's even more insane is the New York State ones are not, but the Utah and the California licenses, they all have the star on them. Those are real IDs.
They are.
Yeah. So these are real IDs. And and so Overdrive's like, oh, there's not that many non-domiciled CDLs. We went out and did a count. Well, how can you count when they're not even classifying the damn license in California as a non-domiciled CDL?
That brings up a good point. So I'm going to speak from a technology tech perspective. If I work at the DMV in California and I go through and I try to query or pull up my non-domiciled licenses, there are none. We don't count them. What if someone went in and found all of these limited term licenses? How many of those are there? Maybe we're asking the wrong question to California.
Right. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
But the vehicle by which they were allowed to do it was the non-domicile vehicle. And so the fact that they're calling them, I've also seen the licenses that say temporary. Some of them will say temporary. Some will say limited term. Some say restricted. It seems like every state's doing something different, but we do have almost every other state putting the words non-domicile on the license, except in 2 states. And maybe y'all can tell me if y'all found any, but obviously California, we all agree. We also have not found non-domicile printed on a Florida license.
That was so maddening with DeSantis's tweets last night. He's like, "Oh, we don't issue licenses to illegals in Florida. It's like, yes, you do. We have the
Well,
receipts.
that's because they're calling an asylum seeker who snuck across the Mexican border, who was granted asylum by a corrupt immigration judge, who stamps every request that's put in front of him, and then issued an EAD card. That's because they're considering him a legal alien. Okay. And if you snuck across the border and you talk some judge into giving you asylum and you got an EAD card, you're not a legal alien in my book.
So,
And so
okay, let me ask you about that, the work authorization cards. I always assumed that it was the employer who imports these drivers. They file for the work authorization, and then a judge has to sign off for it. You're, is that the case here? This judge just signed a work authorization without anybody saying like, "Hey, we really need this driver."
yeah, so that's the way things used to work, Justin. So what's happened is, as we got invaded over the last 4 years, we had an overwhelming number of people going through the system that were illegals that come across the border illegally. These drivers were not brought in by employers for work. These drivers came through the border illegally and then needed to work. And so because they're here, they've got to do something with them. They gave them all EAD cards and they all got in trucks.
I know
have a
we have the
perfect,
student
I-
visa ones too. Same concept. They come over
yeah,
student visas and are in trucks driving.
I have a perfect analogy for this. It's like you're at the airport and the security line's just backing up like through the next terminal, and the TSA is like, "All right, everybody, just keep your shoes on, keep your stuff in your bags. We're just shoving as many people through as we can."
Yeah, I want to zoom out a little bit here because now we're talking about borders and Biden and people coming here and work authorizations. And I want anyone who's watching this that doesn't understand the trucking industry or the history of it they might be asking themselves why. What's the economic driver of this? The economy sucks. It has sucked for a while, and there's issues here. So going back in the history of trucking, in 1980, the business was deregulated. Jimmy Carter signs the Motor Carrier Act of 1980 into law. The previous paradigm, rates were regulated, new entrants to the market were regulated. That paradigm, that system had problems. It was expensive and it needed reform. But what we've seen is it's gone completely in the other direction now. And in the mid 1980s, after a couple of years of deregulation had taken their toll, a lot of truck drivers said, "That's enough of this. I'm not working for less," and started to exit the industry. At that time, and then possibly in the mid 1990s after NAFTA was signed, are the only two times I will give these guys an allowance for the fact that the driver shortage may have been real, right? But what has happened downstream of that, we have this thing called the truck driver shortage narrative, right? And as I have called it, it's a stealth system of corporate welfare masking itself as a jobs program, because what's happened is the job doesn't pay as much as it used to. There is intense competition amongst carriers, which, if you're a free market person, that's fine. Have lots of competition, have lots of entrants in the market. That's great. The problem is that they can't find people to work for garbage wages. They can't find people willing to sit at docks for hours and hours and hours and hours and days and weeks of their lives not being paid for detention time. So trucking has had a labor problem for many decades, okay? And instead of the trucking industry sucking it up and paying more or convincing their customers to pay it more, people like the American Trucking Association and their membership have come to Congress cap in hand saying, "Hey, we need money." They've come to their state houses. "We need money for our training programs." And now there's all these CDL schools all over the place producing extra truck drivers in order to keep this churn and retention problem going. What that does is it suppresses the wages of all the drivers. My theory is this: that system has now reached a point where it doesn't work anymore. Enough Americans are wise to it, and enough Americans know somebody in trucking. They understand the business, and they are saying, "We're not doing this anymore." So the industry and the people who we haul for have had to find new people to throw into this grinder. And that's where we're seeing these non-domicile CDLs, Biden's Trucking Action Plan. And if you read Biden's Trucking Action Plan, all the documents straight from the White House, they quote the American Trucking Association complaining, "Oh no, drivers' wages have gone up 7 to 12%. They are very explicit about this. They were complaining that American truck drivers were being paid too much. What does the McKinsey group guys who are buddies with Pete Buttigieg do? They say, hey, we're going to get all of this expert opinion. We are going to have all these people come and tell us what's wrong with the trucking business, what's wrong with logistics and supply chains, so we can fix it up. They talked to a data scientist from MIT by the name of David Carell, who's been studying this for years. He said, fix the detention problem. You're losing 40% of your capacity every day sitting at docks. Steve Viscelli, Michael Belzer, all these people who've studied trucking. Pay the drivers more. You won't have guys quitting and then having to spend an extra $8,000 on every new driver, onboarding them and training them by just keeping the drivers you already have. What does the Biden trucking task force and these McKinsey guys do? The exact opposite. They worked with these 10 states, as identified by Shannon and his crew, to reduce the requirements for CDLs and flood the market to keep rates down. This is economic warfare against American workers, okay? So that's what's driving all of these different things you're seeing. And I want people who are watching this who don't know anything about trucking to understand that this is the incentive structure underneath all of this. And this is why we're seeing guys like the Chicago Volvo Mafia, Mexican carriers engaging in cabotage, Canadian carriers engaging in cabotage. They're like, hey, we're just going to come and use America. And, oh, there's a truck driver shortage. Well, we will help you solve that by bringing all these guys from Bulgaria and the Ukraine and Russia and Poland and Somalia and Eritrea and India and all over the world, because they don't believe in paying American truckers a decent enough wage, right? And another thing that's going on south of this Biden trucking action plan, and some other things that happen with an uncontrolled border and the irresponsible immigration policies of various governments, is that now we're seeing the sort of do-gooders of the NGOs and foundations and nonprofits and all these organizations that want to help the migrants and refugees. What are they doing now? Danielle's been looking into this, and she put out a really interesting post on her Substack showing, I don't know, how many dozens of these organizations now are getting in there. They've jumped on this driver shortage narrative lie and are assisting corporate America in suppressing American drivers' wages by helping all these refugees get CDLs. Danielle, please.
Yes, I can. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because it'll be easier for me to click through this as we go. So the government, from what I understand, and I did not make it to the bottom of this rabbit hole, but from what I understand, the government pays, I know this is factual, the government pays anyone going into trade school. My brother did it. He went into welding school. They paid for all of it, and then he got some. I think it's amazing. I love trade school. The CDL schools and the trade schools, it is $5,500 coming in from the government as that grant, that program that goes to the trade school. There are very few, I've got to pull this up before I just keep talking. There are very few trade schools that I found that have their own CDL school. They are contracting with a conglomerate of CDL schools, I think. You guys can see the article, right? There it is. So I'm going down. I talked about everything Gorgeous talked about with the driver shortage at the top, but then I just put a bunch of screenshots in here that I found. So driver shortage, all of this promotion to bring people into the driving schools. And again, those government programs, the tuition assistance, the workforce development, paying for people to go to CDL school. I don't think that's bad. I think the population that we're targeting and the system that's targeting that population, that's what I don't agree with. I'm going to keep scrolling down, and some financials in here, how much the Biden-Harris administration poured into this, how much is coming in from the FMCSA, and then there's more screenshots. It's all over.
Right. And one of the things that we don't see, okay, and this has been criticized by more than a few people, including myself, is that there's never any metrics given on this, right? We have no idea how long these people stick around. The mega carriers had stats on this, and there's sort of this average where Americans that go into a mega carrier as their pathway to entry into the trucking industry typically last less than a year, usually within between 9 months and 12 months, they've quit, right? We all know it. Anybody in the trucking industry understands the mega carriers have 100% employee turnover, driver turnover every single year. Some of them, it's like 140%. I think industry national average is something like 75. But all of this money is being handed out by the taxpayer. A lot of money is being channeled through these NGOs and nonprofits who are trying to help the refugees get into trucking. Nobody's asking them, how successful are these programs? Are these truck drivers staying, right? Like, we've been hearing about a shortage of truck drivers for decades. We all know it's bunk. We all know that there's like 2 or 3 times as many CDLs out there as there are jobs which require one. None of these agencies ever come back to the trucking companies and say, how long did you keep your drivers around for? Is that person we gave $5,500 to? Are they still in the trucking business? Someone I quote very often, Steve Viscelli, was asked by the state of California Department of Agriculture to look into figuring out why they couldn't keep any truck drivers around, specifically in the agricultural business in California. And as part of his research in a paper he put out, he found the same thing. There's no accountability. He would go to the state of California DMV. He would go to the trucking companies and say, does anyone know how long these people have stuck around? Are there any success metrics? Is the taxpayer of California getting something back for this in the form of a truck driver that actually stays with the industry? And they either don't tell you, or it's blatantly obvious that all these people quit because they keep coming and asking for more money and more money and more money. And nobody ever tells the trucking industry, no, you guys need to clean up your act. You guys need to pay your drivers better. You guys need to improve the material conditions. You guys need to solve your detention problems so you're not wasting all this capacity at docks all the time. Nobody has ever told the trucking industry, no. That's a major problem.
Well, I can testify to that directly, because in 2019, when I first took this issue to our legislators, I met with some very prominent names. Personally, sat down with them. I mean, I had a lot of trucks, and so I knew them. And I sat down and said, "Here's the issue," and they said, "We agree with you, but we can't go against the Arkansas Trucking Association." And so, believe it or not, these lobbyist groups have a tremendous amount of influence over our elected officials. And when Trump talks about the problem that we have in our government with the deep state, really what he's talking about is not this. I mean, yeah, there's an element of all of the 3-letter stuff, but really what he's talking about is career staffers and career lobbyists. And so no matter how successful we are in a presidential election by getting Donald Trump and his administration in place, the same lobbyist group that was there negotiating with Joe Biden for the trucking industry is the same group that's there communicating with Donald Trump. And so we got a new president, but we didn't get new staffers and we didn't get new lobbyists. And so the problem with our structure legislatively is that we don't have term limits on these fools. we need term limits on all these lobbyists. We need term limits on all these career staffers, because that's where the real power is the legislators that I've talked to. They're afraid of those people. And it should be the opposite.
3 months ago, CBS News did an article on this training program to get violent felons through trucking school. And so I reached out to the journalist who did that piece. And I said, hey, turnover in trucking is insane. And the guys that are going through this program, because of their records, they're going to be disqualified from 99% of all the carriers out there. Do you have any data on how long these guys that go through this program last at the companies who hire them? And the guy's like, well, that's interesting. I never thought of that. Because they were more worried about like the recidivism rates. They were trying to think of ways to like keep these guys from, they wanted to get them jobs so they can, make some money and stay out of trouble. But I thought he didn't realize that like the just in trucking in general, like the turnover rates are over 100%. I said, so you're putting these guys through this program and wasting all this taxpayer money, basically setting them up to fail. And after like a day or two of going back and forth, the guy just like stopped responding to my DMs. They had
Right.
zero interest in covering this.
Yeah, and I want to speak on that as well. The the American Trucking Association has a research arm called American Transportation Research Institute, ATRI, put out a white paper in July, just a few weeks ago. And in it, they discussed, the changing demographics of trucking and how do we get certain people into the business. And much to my disgust and Danielle's and anybody else that's looking at it, they spent 8 pages of that white paper discussing ways to get 18-year-olds out of foster care and directly into the trucking industry, because they're already, like they're precarious with their accommodations in their homes. Maybe if they just come and live in a truck for us, like how like completely unempathetic, how detached from reality, and how scummy that the leading corporate lobby group who supposedly represents the entire trucking industry is talking about grabbing kids out of foster care and putting them directly in a truck. Like, I get it. Kids need like a career path when you're 18, you're trying to figure out the world and all that. But to specifically target these people who've already had a hard go of life that they're living in foster care, like, who approved this?
I think it's a lack of it's a lack of knowledge of like the amount of responsibility that is involved in like operating a vehicle. That's kind of like my new talking point now. I'm sick and tired of talking about the shortage and the turnover and stuff. For me, it's about the responsibility. And I think the people who come up with these ideas, they've never been in a truck. They don't know the skills involved and the struggles of the day-to-day life of like being in that truck for weeks and months on the road. And so they just have this idea of like, well, anybody can be trained to do anything. And it's like, no, like it takes a specific, it doesn't matter what background or whatever they come from. It's a hard job. And everyone just seems to think that, oh, we can just plug anybody into this. And with, enough money and time and taxpayer dollars, we can make this work. It's like, it's clearly not.
And I think from the experience of a truck driver on that end, I don't know who they talk to in the social services field to think that pushing foster kids or justice involved individuals was a good idea. And I want to touch more on the foster care because I've worked in it. I worked in it for years. I have a master's in social work, so I do have a bit of credibility to talk about it. If a child, and this is absolutely not all of them, so I want to be careful with what I say, but when a child reaches the age of 18 in foster care, generally that means they have been in it their entire life. They have been passed from family to family. They have probably been lied to, and they're so jaded towards the world because of what they have been through for the past 18, 15, however many years that they've been in the system. Financially, foster kids, and this is most states, they already have a guaranteed tuition assistance going into college. So it's applying for CDL school. They don't even have to go through as much of that as someone else does applying for the tuition assistance. Foster kids get it already. So it's an easy path into getting that $5,500 per student.
And I'm not opposed to any kid going into a program like this, but you got to be smart about it. Like if I was to create a system like this, I would take 18-year-olds, put them in a warehouse first, let them learn how the trucks come in, how stuff gets loaded, have them be around this stuff. That way you can figure out whether or not this is a person who could be trusted with this position. As soon as they hit 21, by all means, put them through CDL school. If they make it through that and they're still gung-ho about this, by the time they're 30, they are going to be in like the top percentile of their age group as long as they're not wrecking into anything and they get themselves a good job. I am 100% in favor of somebody doing this, but they have to be set up properly. They have to be given the full picture of like, this is what it's going to be like. It's going to suck in the beginning, but I promise you, if you can make it your first year or two without wrecking, anybody will hire you. You can go work at Walmart, retire by your 45, and live out the rest of your life happy.
Right. Well, this is the bigger, and getting back to this crash in Florida and the problem we're having with the insourced labor is that the barriers to entry are so low, and getting a CDL is I hate to say that it's easy because the job requires so much, but the problem is that the regulations say, show us you understand how an air brake system works. You can hook and unhook from a trailer. You can back up 100 feet. All right, sweet. You did all that. There you go. But there's so much more to trucking. You know, um, our friend Tanya Iserer from WFAA in Dallas Fort Worth, did a report on this crash that happened there in 2021. Turns out this guy immigrant from Haiti goes to a 3-week long CDL school, gets a CDL within 3 weeks. I don't know why that's possible. That's a whole nother topic that should be discussed. But no winter driving training whatsoever. Hits an ice storm in Dallas Fort Worth, completely stopped traffic. He crashes into a bunch of people who'd already crashed into a bunch of other people, removes 2 people from this mortal coil. Investigation, he says, yeah, I don't know. I went to a truck driving school in Florida. They gave me a CDL, but I never got trained how to drive in winter. Oh, that's great. What does that tell us about our CDL training system? And this other crash, this Hope Trans thing, I want to steer it back a little bit. There was another guest I was hoping to have here named Dale Prax, who works for a company called Freight Validate. Many of you in the world of trucking and freight and logistics will know who Dale is. He couldn't make it today. He told me about a tool that the FMCSA has where you can take these carriers who are considered an imminent hazard to the American public and immediately shut them down, pull their DOT numbers, pull their MC numbers, cancel their insurance. And that's been done on carriers before.
Yes.
And I was on the phone with Dale the other day, and there was this other incident. Again, this issue in Florida last week is one of many, and it's reached this entire thing has reached a fever pitch because people keep seeing this stuff. Big crash at the end of June, just outside Dallas in Terrell, Texas. This guy working for a company called Hope Trans, recent arrival from Cuba. Hope Trans, apparently, according to the research Danielle has done, they're kind of slave drivers, forcing people to work a lot longer hours, treat their drivers like garbage. This gentleman overworked, falls asleep at the wheel, crashes into a vehicle, kills almost an entire family. And, they are still in business. As of 2 days ago, when I spoke with Dale on the phone, Hope Trans has not had an imminent hazard order placed against them by the FMCSA. So, do any of you guys have some insight into what we have to do? I mean, Danielle's obviously been doing the Lord's work with all this investigation on her own. Dale's been doing his as well. Again, bummer he couldn't make it. But it seems to me like there are tools available for FMCSA and other levels of government to just take these guys that have these terrible safety records and are involved in these horrific, tragic wrecks that are totally unnecessary and shut them down.
That's insane. This couldn't have been a more worst case scenario. This is literally like a Chernobyl level event. There were so many things that had to go wrong that went wrong for this to happen because as the post office, you don't just give out mail to whoever wants it. There are restrictions in place. So this load was under contract through Covenant Transport, who, as far as I've always been concerned, they don't have the greatest reputation. Back in my early days of driving, they were always seen as a second or third chance carrier. By all means, people sometimes do deserve second chances, but so as far as my understanding of this was their load. Then they brokered it to a third party carrier, which was this Hope Trans carrier. Hope Trans had a system where drivers could text them at any given time saying, I need coffee. And they would add more hours onto their drive time, which is insane. The load was a team load. So you as the truck driver, you show up to the plant at the post office. There's a person inside the plant that checks in every single truck. They're called an expediter. The expediter is the person in charge of making sure that everything is up to snuff as far as the mail being secured in the truck, there's no flat tires on the trailer or anything like that. At any given moment, they have this thing called a 5500. They can pull up their tablet, write up a PS form 5500, and that contractor does not get paid. And that was typically what we did in Philadelphia to shut down bad carriers. We had contractors that would come in all the time with straight trucks on contracts that were supposed to be 53-foot trailers. And every single day, we'd load that straight truck full of mail. They'd run out of space, and then we'd have to get one of our guys to cover the rest of that run for them. And that is incredibly wasteful. It's extra overtime they have to spend to get the mail delivered on time. And why the expediter, why Covenant didn't do their job? We know why Hope Trans didn't do their job because they're criminal scumbags, but why the expediter didn't do their job? Like there were so many things that could have shut this down before this accident happened, and everything failed.
So on this issue of these Hope Trans carriers and various layers of LLCs, Danielle's been sharing a bunch of different screens here, and a lot of people are going to be looking at that and not really understanding what we're looking at. Carriers do get inspected. Their trucks go across way stations and inspection areas and ports of entry and roadside, being pulled over by the police, and they do accrue a record of driver fitness, equipment fitness, and just general operational safety. And there are these scores. And as Danielle has found out, these Hope Trans guys, lengthy record of driver out of service, driver citations, and their trucks just being huge heaps of junk.
And they were falsifying the trip tickets too, which is insane. When you get a load of mail at the plant, they don't call them bill of ladings, they call them trip tickets internally. But it's just a piece of paper that they print out, and it's got the truck information, the seal on the trailer if there is one, and then when it's supposed to be delivered by. And Danielle, I don't know if you have screenshots in this article, but
I
they
don't think
had
I have the bill of lading or trip ticket that's what I was looking for.
yeah, they were falsifying the trip tickets. So like that right there should have just been like, okay, shut it down. You guys are going to jail for a long time. Enjoy your fines. But I don't get it. Like the FMCSA is just letting these guys still run. They
Yeah, they're
should have been
still
shut
operating.
down. They should have been shut down the day that this got out.
Right. And I think this is a good spot here to expand on the chameleon carrier issue a little bit, and the ways that their businesses are structured, so that when a company like Hope Trans's truck gets placed out of service so many times, they just transfer the ownership of the truck to another LLC or shell company that's owned by the same people. And that's why you see anyone that follows folks like us on Twitter or on Facebook, you'll see pictures of truck drivers ripping a sign, a paper or cardboard sign that's taped to the side of their truck. They rip it off and then they put on a new one. Same truck, same driver, same owners hauling the same loads, but it's all different companies to avoid being shut down by the government. Danielle, can you please expand on this system?
Yeah, I am so glad I wrote some of these articles just for this moment and this week. So I wrote this article because people are sending, I know Justin, you guys are the same, but people send me or tag me in pictures of these trucks all the time. The tapes, someone is taping it, they have a video of someone changing the papers on the truck. And so I wanted to make sure that we had it written out somewhere to make sense of this for anyone outside of the industry. So I wrote this article, What the Heck is a Chameleon Carrier? And so what these companies are doing is they will file for a USDOT, their trucking authority. They will run under that authority until something bad happens, an awful wreck, and the insurance cancels on them and they realize they can't get another insurance. Or they will run up their safety score so high that they can't get loads from brokers, from shippers. And so instead of realizing, like, hey, what we're doing is not working, we should probably go into another business, they just have another USDOT, whether they buy it off Facebook, whether they register a new one under their wife's name, their cousin's name, their brother, their son, whoever. Some of these that I've seen, it's literally as if they have a file folder just stacked with USDOTs waiting for the next one that they can use. And so when you go through the inspections, on each inspection, like we were looking at just a moment ago, the DOT officer, the inspector, logs the VIN number of the truck. And so on some of those VINs, you can go back and trace, and you have to be careful because, yes, people will leave one company, go to work at another company. There's a lot of nuances, but 8 times out of 10, it's pretty easy to do. You can go back and look at that VIN and see which company they were running under for this number of months or years. And then you'll see all of the trucks shift and run under the next USDOT. and then you'll see them go under the other one. And I think the highest number of this that I found is 7 or 8. Um, most of the time, once they get to like 2 or 3, they'll kind of split off and the trucks will go different directions. It's insane.
Someone else who's been like incredible at digging into this stuff is Ryan Joyce, CEO over at
Yes.
Genlogs. So they have they have the whole system of private 4K resolution cameras all across the United States highways. And as a joke, like not really as a joke, but like Ryan has been tracking this one particular truck just to showcase to the people paying attention like what their systems are capable of. And every like couple of weeks, it's the same truck, but they've got a new DOT sign and new everything on the side of the truck. I think what their mistake that these guys are doing is they're using the same truck number,
Yep.
which is why they're able to track it so easily. So these aren't even like clever people. Like if they were smart, they would just scrape that truck number off, put a new one on there, but they don't even bother to do that. They're literally just slapping a new magnetic sign on the side. And so I don't know if I can share. How do I share this one? Let me see.
Yeah, I don't have Ryan's stuff pulled up, but some of the stuff he shared is, I mean, I can't get that because I don't have access to Zen logs or those pictures, but
So
it's
he has
fascinating.
he has a contest right now. He's doing a $7,000 giveaway to anyone who can guess the
I have
DOT.
Gen logs. Where do you want me to look up?
It's just on his LinkedIn.
Okay.
He's giving away $7,000 to anyone who can guess the DOT number that this particular chameleon carrier uses next.
I forget how many DOTs this one has used. It's like 6 or 7.
Yeah, this is a bad one.
Yeah.
Let me
And
just go
one
to his
of those
profile.
in there, when he posted when he posted it the first time, I looked at one of the US DOTs, and it's a huge like pharmaceutical company with their own assets. So I don't know what they were doing, but I think they were just impersonating that carrier.
Yeah, so Ryan's more focused on like these are like this is like an even deeper level with this because these guys don't just run as a chameleon carrier. They'll impersonate other carriers and show up and just rip the cargo off.
Yep.
And so Ryan once somebody reports something stolen to Ryan, he puts all the details in their system, and then they actually go back and track where this truck has been, where all they're going, and maybe who else they've ripped off. It's so like he's seen here like, oh, this guy picked up in Washington, dropped off, looks like somewhere Philadelphia or New Jersey, and yeah, he's just finding these guys left and right.
Well, there you have it on that issue. This is another way. Again, I talked about the diffusion of responsibility, different layers of different governance. You know, state agencies are supposed to be looking after this, and you know, who is actually supposed to be in charge of the LLC registration and tracking all of these different ghost carriers and chameleon carriers, and actually having the enforcement authority to deal with this very clear violation of all the rules and very scummy behavior?
I believe it's the FMCSA, but the problem is the FMCSA has no enforcement wing. They're just a bunch of bureaucrats who come up with the rules. So, I get it. It's a thankless task, but so they come up with the rules and then they rely upon uh, DOT officers on the ground to really enforce it. And then we have another layer on top of that, which is, of course, I'm blanking on it now. What's the sticker everybody gets when you get a level 1 inspection?
IFTA. Oh no,
If
sorry.
no, that's your fuel tax.
That's fuel.
Dang it. Of course, I'm blanking
That's
on
just
it.
that's just your state DOT inspection, right? Oh, CVSA,
No,
Commercial
yeah,
Vehicle
CVS,
Safety
thank you.
Alliance.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So FMCSA comes up with these rules, and then they use that group to really kind of give out the message to law enforcement because I talked to a guy from that organization, and they were kind of the ones that were struggling with the English language enforcement in 2016, and they were the ones who suggested to these groups in the Biden administration to just drop the out of service aspect of it because they're like we're just overrun with this.
Right. So back to the English thing again, because I just know there's going to be some people out here of the sort of bleeding heart progressive variety. Oh, why do you need to be able to speak English to drive a truck? You know, if you're driving in Africa or Europe or wherever, there's all kinds of different languages going on there. This is the United States. And I want Justin to comment on this. I will comment on it because I've been a trucker my entire life. Shannon's drove truck. When you're out there on the highway, all the signs are in English. You go through the mountains, and oftentimes you have to pull over at the top of the mountain, and they have what's called a grade information sign where it tells you, hey, how steep is this hill? Where are the runaway ramps? What gear you should be in? What's the speed limit? You drive across a state like Wyoming, which has one of the highest truck accident, collision, and incident rates in the entire country because of the weather. You drive through Ohio or Wyoming, they often close Interstate 80. They often close other roads due to high winds, due to snow, ice on the road. All of the information signs that tell you about this are in English. Go to California and go over Donner Pass. They have the signs before you get there when you're in Nevada. Hey, chain law in effect. You're supposed to chain up. Donner's closed, whatever. All in English. Your daily pre-trip inspection reports, English. All the staff, enforcement officers, cops at the scene of an accident, there's some road closure, English. Detour, let's say they've closed the highway for an incident and everyone's being forced to go somewhere else, and they'll have people standing there telling you what the routing is, all done in English. I'm sorry, America, but this is an English country, and if you're in a safety sensitive job like being a truck driver where you have to interact with all these people, take in all this information from signs, read weather reports, take directions from enforcement officials, all of that's being done in English. Nobody here, and I don't believe anybody else out there, is asking for this to be enforced out of some kind of racial animus or xenophobia, or we don't want these immigrants around. This is a safety issue. Justin, Shannon, you guys have both been on the road.
Yeah, so Schneider used to send me up to Canada a lot. I was on a dedicated account hauling trailer parts for Aurora, and one of the routes, one of the lanes on that route, you pick up a trailer preloaded just outside of Indianapolis, and you go up into Ontario, and then you have like 11 stops along this trip, and you're going through all through Ontario, a couple stops in Quebec, and then you come down through New York. And so I've been through Canada probably 20 times before this. Had no problem because you're in Ontario. The signs are all in English and French. But I had never been to Quebec before the first time I went on this route. And there is nothing in English in Quebec. And I was terrified because, like, even though French isn't that dissimilar of a language from English, when you're reading like the names of towns, etc., you really got to pay attention to that. And that's just going from English to French. I can't imagine what it would be like if I was in Japan and I had to like read all the signage. And I don't know anything about Japan. I love Japan. I love Japanese culture, but like I'm not going to go show up in Japan and say, "Hey, give me a CDL so I can go up in the mountains and drive trucks there." Like it's idiotic. And why we've allowed that to happen here in the U.S. for so long is beyond me.
I used to do a little bit of mountain driving out west, but it's been 20 years ago when I first started driving. But more recently, I helped one time, probably about a year ago or so, running a route. It was 45,000 pounds. I had to take it from Little Rock, Arkansas, up to Marshall, Missouri. It's frozen foods, but I took Highway 65 up through the hills, and there was a highway escape ramp and everything along the way. And it was just a good refresher for me of how serious this job is and how dangerous it is for guys that are pulling 45,000 through the mountains and going down those hills, because you do need to be an experienced driver. You need to know how to manage your transmission. The automatic transmission's probably been one of the things that has allowed people to feel more comfortable in those environments than they should be. And so, yeah, absolutely. There's been times I've been driving for a really long time. I've trained drivers how to drive. And so, being uncomfortable myself just reminded me of how dangerous these position these drivers can get themselves in.
That's a really good point with the automatics, because what trucks we never hear about and getting involved in like major accidents like this? Livestock. Those are some of the craziest drivers on the road. They speed like crazy, yes, but as far as like the actual skill of the driver and like what's involved, if you're going through Wyoming as a livestock truck and you got a road closed sign, they don't care. They just blast on through. But they have the equipment and the experience and the knowledge of being able to deal with that. So yeah, the vast majority of these wrecks we're seeing nowadays are people with hardly any experience behind the wheel in an automatic transmission, and that is the recipe for disaster.
Right. And so you just mentioned something I want to highlight. The livestock guys, nobody who's buying or selling livestock wants an inexperienced driver behind that wheel. That industry self-selects for its own drivers because they can't afford to lose however many head of cattle or sheep or pigs or whatever's on board, right? They don't want to like have a disaster on their hands, right? Now, some parts of the trucking and sorry, go ahead, Shannon. Am I wrong?
No. I have to add something in here. There's one unique thing about livestock people that differentiates them from the vans and the reefers and all that. Nobody brokers livestock.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Sorry.
Yep. That's great.
There's no brokers in livestock hauling.
Right. We'll get to the brokers in a minute. But like, so we've talked about the FMCSA, DOT, states, DMVs, all these people who have all this responsibility. What about the responsibility of the industry itself? Right. So the livestock guys, they don't have any of these problems because they have their own clearing mechanisms to make sure that they get top quality drivers with top quality equipment because the lives of their animals are on the line. Guys that haul heavy, oversized loads, the companies that do that and have been doing it for decades, you almost never hear about them getting in accidents. Same thing. If you're hauling a 250, 300, 400,000 pound, mining truck for Caterpillar that's going up to Fort McMurray into the oil sands, you're not putting a guy in that truck who just got here yesterday from Somalia and doesn't know how to drive a manual transmission and has no idea what he's doing. It seems to be that it's the freight and reefer markets that just have all of these super inexperienced people. And I have to ask, like, what responsibility does industry itself have, like, especially on the broker and shipper side, to clean up their act so they function more like the oversized guys, the hazardous materials carriers, the livestock carriers who make demands to have safe, skilled, competent, professional operators behind the wheel. What is it about the freight market and the reefer market that's not the case? Tell us, Shannon.
You're not gonna like my answer, and that's because I know from our investigation into the lanes and the carriers that are involved in this, and the customers of the carriers who are involved in all this, most of them do not haul directly for shippers. I would think it would be very hard for someone who doesn't speak English to drive to Detroit, Michigan, and to walk into GM's headquarters and say, I would like to haul freight for you. Can I speak to your buyer? And then to be able to negotiate that transaction. When you get into the more specialized niches like tanker and pneumatic and in livestock and oversized, all of those transactions are still very personable. They're still very relationship oriented, and it requires this level of face-to-face engagement that weeds all of that stuff out, because you have to present yourself and you have to sell yourself and you have to sell your operation, and everybody knows everybody involved. And somehow we have allowed the dry van and the reefer space to turn into the DoorDash and Uber experience instead of what it used to be, which was the same type of engagement and not so transactional. It was more relationship based and not transactional. And I think what we're experiencing is what can happen when you take an industry as important as trucking and you take all of the relationship out, you take all of the ownership out, you take all of the accountability out, and you just make it an app that somebody can sign up for, and you give them an 80,000 pound truck and they go deliver a load. And so in doing that, the dry van and reefer space, the shippers are, they're trying to deflect responsibility and accountability. Hey, we're giving it to brokers. The brokers are trying to say, hey, we're preempted. We're not responsible. We don't pick the drivers, and so everybody's deflecting accountability. But I think their day's coming. I think their day's coming soon. And everybody's going to learn that it's the shippers and the brokers who have benefited from and I'm saying shippers too. Look, I know there's a lot of brokers that are going to start throwing mud at me, and I could care less, but it's really about who has profited. And everybody will say, oh, well, the carrier's profiting. Are they really? Because
How many have gone out
of?
of business? How many American carriers and drivers have, like, our friends at FreightWaves have a whole subdivision of their website called layoffs and bankruptcies. They have they have writers dedicated to documenting nothing but American trucking companies going out of business.
But it's simple mathematics. These guys that are bringing these drivers in, they profit for a little while, but greed takes over and they don't know when to stop. So they just keep coming and they keep growing their companies until they get to the point that they cannibalize each other, till they get to the point that they disrupt things so much that the entire country sees who they are. That's what's happened. That's what's happening now. Their greed got they've had this runway for 9 years, but they got so greedy and they kept growing that their presence became so unavoidable that you can't ignore it anymore. They're such a big part of the marketplace that now they're, the topic of discussion, not just in industry news, but on Fox News.
Yeah, undercutting begets more undercutting. It's
Yeah.
a common talking point as far as like immigration goes is like we need to import as many people as possible because our replacement rate for our demographic decline is unattainable. Like we need to import those people because our population is getting old, so we need to import more people. And they never like take the next step. Well, those people you import, they get old too. And it's the same thing with these trucking carriers. We got to increase capacity to keep the rates low so that these new guys can undercut everybody else. But then you're going to reach a level where everybody that you're importing to undercut is going to start undercutting themselves too, and you're just going to collapse the whole thing.
And then take a bunch of American companies with you and render people like me unemployed. You know, it's just it's not sustainable. It doesn't work. And to be quite frank, we've all been involved in this space for many years. We've been talking about it online, debating with other stakeholders, carriers, truckers, brokers, and everyone has their own little bugaboo, their own particular thing they think will fix it. But the problem is it's so multifactorial. There's so many different competing incentive structures. It's international in scope. Shannon just brought up brokers. How many freight brokers are actually based in Serbia or the Ukraine or somewhere in Africa or somewhere in South America? And what loyalty to the safety of the American motorist and the function of the United States economy does somebody have who doesn't even live here? And all they're doing is just taking their rips off the top of loads, not vetting drivers, not vetting carriers. Hey, I made a couple emails. I connected some people. Here's my couple $100, which goes an awful lot further in Serbia than it does in the United States.
When Sean Duffy was on FreightWaves a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "I want American trucks driven by American drivers hauling American freight on American roads," I don't think he understood really just the whole scope of the situation. He doesn't understand that. I don't know if this is for the majority, but for a lot of the supply chain, it's a immigrant driving a truck owned by somebody overseas, being dispatched by someone from overseas through a load that was brokered to somebody from overseas to a shipper based in the US. And if he's willing to like go that route and rip all of the foreign interference out, we're not even, supply chain crisis doesn't even begin to describe the level of chaos that would ensue. If he wants to do that, Godspeed, but they make these bold statements like that, and I don't think they realize just how things have like kind of shaken out over the last few years.
It's going to get worse before it gets better. Um, Guys, I've kept you here for an hour and a half. I don't know how long people would want to tune into this, but in case we've missed anything, is there anything further you guys have to add to this particular topic?
I do want to touch on this freight broker thing before we move off. There are very bad freight brokers. There are very bad drivers and carriers, but there are also really great freight brokers, just like there's really great carriers and drivers. I think that a lot of the technology that we have today, and this is the reason why I dove into the FMCSA data as deep as I have and keep going. A lot of the technology we have today hides or suppresses what's really going on behind the scenes. So when a freight broker is vetting a carrier, they get what they get through their technology. That information comes from the FMCSA. So if that carrier looks good in the FMCSA, that's the base of what we're running from. And outside of that, there's not a lot. As a freight broker, I would not know if someone has a falsified cab card. And if I ask a driver for his cab card, he's going to think I'm stupid and not send it or like throws a fit, which is understandable. We should not get to the point of where we're having to ask drivers for their CDLs, even a selfie or their cab cards. But that technology is hiding a lot of the actual issues and allowing carriers to get through the barrier to entry has already let them through, but it is allowing the carriers to be booked on those loads because they look good on paper. And if it's automated, then as long as it looks good, it's going to go through and then the carrier gets the load. And here we are.
Speaking on technology, just before I get to the other guys here, electronic logging devices, driver-facing cameras. Electronic logging devices were supposed to make the roads safer. They have not. Aggressive driving, speeding, crashes, all gone up since the ELD mandate. Driver-facing cameras, it seems pretty clear to me that all the camera does is record what bad thing actually took place and does not prevent it. So to further your point, Danielle, the technology that's supposed to like make things safer is actually covering up all of this other crap that's going on, allowing it to happen. And the government can say, hey, we did an ELD mandate. We're making things safer, but it doesn't address the human and economic factors of what's going on here.
So I made it a mission this week to like really push back hard on LinkedIn. I've been seeing too many posts about the importance of cameras and why we need cameras. And this is why you need our camera system. Don't trust that camera system. Our camera system's the best. And without fail, they don't realize like all the footage that they're showing, the camera in the truck didn't stop that accident from happening. All it did was allow you to put the blame on the driver, which by all means it should have happened, but the driver cannot get into that accident if they were never hired in the first place. And that's something nobody wants to touch because as soon as I boldly make that claim, it's like, oh, why are you attacking these guys? No, when nobody's saying the camera's going to prevent all this stuff, it's like bullshit. You guys want this stuff in the cabs because it makes your jobs easier, so you don't have to do the vetting for the driver and actually take ownership and responsibility in case one of your drivers fucks up. Sorry if I don't know if we can curse on this or not, but it's gotten so bad lately. And I'm honestly like, when I post something on LinkedIn, I get maybe like a couple of likes, maybe a comment or two. But this post I had yesterday, I've never seen anything. 35,000 impressions, 94 comments. Like it's a really hot topic issue, and it took me totally by surprise.
You gave the tech nerds the wedgie they deserve, Justin.
I'm gonna keep pulling because I didn't realize I was gonna get this level of pushback because
Well,
they
it's
they have
totally different. Totally from X to LinkedIn is like a 180.
100%. But I'm not used to getting this level. I love getting this kind of pushback on Twitter. They don't realize like what a unhinged maniac I am on this topic. So when somebody, as soon as I put something out there, I make no political claim whatsoever. I mention nothing about the immigration status of this
Yep.
person. I just say, don't hire people like this, or if this person was never hired, this never would have happened. And the immediate pushback is, oh, you MAGA types are all the same. I have never voted for Trump in my life. I applaud anything good he's doing, and I will criticize anything bad he is doing. But the human mind does not parse information through a true
Yep.
or false filter. It parses it through an us versus them filter, and I think that's the two ribs that I'm gonna like slide the knife into and twist because so much of this stuff, as soon as you try to bring up like a hot topic issue, everybody wants to turn it into like some tribal thing. And I think Shannon and some of these other guys have done a great job of like, this isn't about the politics of this. This is safety. All this extra tech in the cab, all this extra surveillance, all you're doing is making the person behind the wheel miserable, and they're gonna quit, and they're gonna get replaced by someone even less experienced who probably had even less reason to be behind the wheel of that truck in the first place. So it is not helping. If anything, you're actually making the job in the industry worse.
Yeah, it's a cover for economic evisceration. Shannon.
My final word is Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves all those who are crushed in spirit. And I believe right now we've got families across this country who are crushed in spirit and brokenhearted. And we've got American truck drivers and American trucking companies that have been devastated. And the Lord is with them. The Lord is for them. So be watching for a miracle.
Amen to that, brother. Okay, so I'm going to let all of y'all, let any of the viewers or listeners to this figure out how to come and find you. Shannon?
You can follow us on Twitter at ATU Truckers, and you can go to our website at www.americantruckers.com. Please register, receive newsletters, and stay up to date on what we're doing.
And that's totally free.
That's free.
Danielle?
Or my social media, it's at maybe Danielle with 3 E's at the end.
You also write a wonderful Substack.
I do. I have a domain. It's highwayveritas.com.
And where you compile a lot of the information we were talking about today. In fact, probably you're doing more investigative journalism work into issues in the trucking industry today than anybody else. And I would venture to say over the legacy trucking media as well. Justin.
Thank you.
You can always find me on Twitter or X these days at Super Trucker.
All right. Thanks for being with us. My name's Gord. I host the Voice of Gord podcast. You're probably listening to that here. If you're watching this on YouTube or are new to me, you can find me at autonomoustruckers.substack.com. I write about the industry and I interview many people in it, from drivers right on up to CEOs to the academics and nerds who study us. I'm writing a book called End of the Road: Inside the War on Truckers, which will be published in spring of 2026. Thank you very much for listening. If you're out there and you've watched this and you're fed up with all of the accidents, you're fed up with the terrible driving, you're fed up with the death toll on North American highways, contact your local representative and tell them you want inquests, inquiries, investigations, cleanups, something to go on with your local government, and then something to go on with the federal government. Contact your federal representatives. We have multiple levels of problems here, multiple levels of failure in enforcement, and all kinds of bad stuff going on. And be careful out there on the roads, everybody. Thanks so much.